The challenge, the first thing I want to talk about is the what, the challenge fund, which is the source of funding for the proposal that we have brought to you today. The challenge fund was created in 2014. It was part of the Strong Neighborhoods Plan. The idea was to provide some significant funds to organizations that had the ability to stabilize neighborhoods that had a lot of tax foreclosed properties in them. There was a competitive process that was run to choose 2 recipients of Challenge Fund grants of $500,000 each, and those grants were given to the Housing Authority of the City of Milwaukee to do work in the Harambee neighborhood, and the Northwest Side Community Development Corporation to do work in the neighborhoods near Century City. The Housing Authority has created the Ready to Go Homes project with its challenge fund. They have renovated 4 tax foreclosed properties for sale to owner occupants and have another 6 properties under construction right now. The Northwest Side Community Development Corporation received the grant for Century City, but determined after expending about $80,000 of that grant that they were unable to complete the work that they had committed to. So the challenge fund is the what here. That's the source of funds.
Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Stamper.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Martha, did they begin any development with the 80,000?
The 80,000, did they do one?
How many houses did they start with
I
that?
see the Executive Director, Mr. Snyder, in the back. Would you like to come join us?
I can help answer the question. Maria
Sure.
Prioletto with the Department of City
Good morning.
Development. They completed 2 houses with that project and have sold them for owner occupancy.
Okay.
You want to share?
That's all. Thank you very much.
Now, the who in this proposal is Pastors United Community Advocacy, and their leadership is here today with Pastor Greg Lewis. Pastors United is a nonprofit organization, coalition of churches. They have a program to promote owner occupancy called the Faith Builds program. That program has purchased and renovated, resold some tax foreclosed properties, so they have been a customer of our properties. And they also have a home buyer education program and credit repair program to help create a pipeline of buyers for the projects they work on, and they have purchased 12 properties from the city over the past several years.
Mr. Chair?
Alderman Bauman.
Just curious, have any of those 12 been completed and sold or rented to actual occupants?
Yes.
How many? I'm curious.
Pastor Lewis, can you?
Actually,
Okay, when I identify yourself.
yeah, actually, I'm Pastor Greg Lewis, and I'm founder and president of Pastors United. Actually, it's 16 homes, and we partnered with another 7, so 23 homes we've rehabbed and put
So 23 have been rehabbed?
Yes, and put families in them.
Okay.
Then the where of this project is the Garden Homes Historic District. We just, previous filed, talked about investment in the Century City Business Park. This particular property, the Garden Homes Historic District, is just northeast of the Century City Business Park. It's circled there. And what makes it a special neighborhood near Century City is that it is the site of the first municipally sponsored housing cooperative that was built in the United States back in the early 1920s. Consists of 93 homes. They were all meant to provide affordable housing. The area is on the National Register Historic District. It's also been a City of Milwaukee Historic District since 2013, and it's within the Northside Promise Zone boundary as well. Thought it would be useful just to review a little bit of the historic nature of the property. You can see this is the original tract of homes that were constructed in the Gardens Homes. It was a pretty rural area at the time. Here's photographs of what some of the houses looked like in their original state. And I wanted to point out the man whose face I've circled here is Mayor Emil Seidel, the first socialist mayor of Milwaukee. He actually lived in the Garden Homes neighborhood.
What year is that, Martha?
Well, it was, I'm not sure exactly what year that picture is, but it was, the houses were built between 1921 and 23. So almost 100 years old, very close. In recent years, the neighborhood has unfortunately not been nearly as stable as it was in its earliest years. The city owns 6 tax foreclosed properties within the historic district. The Housing Infrastructure Preservation Fund has been used to make repairs at 4 of those 6 properties, primarily roof work. The assessed values in the neighborhood are pretty low. In terms of the properties that the city owns, the most recent assessments are anywhere from just a shade under $27,000 to a shade under $60,000. The average assessed value of the 6 properties we own is shade under $47,000. If you look at the assessment district in which they're located, the average assessment in the larger Garden Homes neighborhood is about $52,000. So these are lower than average assessments. We have properties listed for sale now at current prices from $2,500 to $4,900, and we have not attracted buyers at those prices. So the photographs on the bottom show several of the homes that are the subject of this proposal. The one on the right, you can obviously see the Housing Infrastructure Preservation Fund has been used to do new roof and gutter work on that house. The original facade on all these properties was stucco. One of the big problems has been very badly deteriorated stucco on some of them. The city has done the stucco work on one of the 6 properties, but the other ones are pretty bad shape. And here are views of the other homes that are the subject of this proposal. And I wanted to point out this chimney has duct tape around it. It's a very unique repair strategy. So they are in varying degrees of deterioration, but all of them are quite deteriorated, and considerable investment is going to be required to save these structures. Pastors United has hired Toki and Associates to evaluate the properties. Their current estimates for renovation of these properties, both interior and exterior, range from $68,000 to $144,000 a property. That's an average about of $106,000 per property. Those estimates include a lot of exterior work, adding new garages. The garages, in most part, are either falling down or will fall down with a gentle push. All of the interior mechanical systems would be replaced, essentially interior gut rehab, I believe, and window repair and replacement. The development team has met with staff from the Historic Preservation Commission just last week, and the staff indicated that they thought there was room for flexibility in terms of some of the existing historic renovation requirements for the exteriors, given the degree of deterioration and the amount of previous alterations that have been done on these properties. More specifically, I think the most significant flexibility they thought was possible would be to allow vinyl siding on those properties where the stucco is badly deteriorated, and also allow the use of vinyl windows as window replacement.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Baum.
is the proposal to amend the design guidelines for this historic district, or just on an ad hoc basis bend the rules? I mean, I think it should be done sort of frontally, in the sense of, if this is going to be a policy decision for this particular historic district, we should amend the design guidelines so it's consistent, so the next private person that comes along has to put stucco back on, and it's twice the cost. I mean,
The historic preservation staff suggested, primarily because these properties are in city ownership, which actually kicks them into some oversight, because it's a National Register district. As a city-owned properties, it kicks them into some national oversight. So their recommendation was, at this point, don't change the guidelines. Now, they might be influenced to change them after this transaction.
Okay.
But for the time being, because these are city properties, they felt that these should be handled on a case-by-case basis with the flexibility.
because as I mentioned this, because this comes up a lot, and I just am concerned. I have no problem with this transaction. I understand the economic challenges in this historic district. This district was somewhat controversial. There was strong passion in favor of creating it, yet we've run into repeated problems of this sort. I mean, when you have properties assessed at $20,000 and $30,000, doing historically correct valuations are probably not practical at that
Yeah.
valuation level. So I'm worried about the next historic district property owner in Sherman Park or Concordia or McKinley Boulevard coming in and saying, hey, you let them put on vinyl siding, what about us? We have the same problems. Yeah, our houses are assessed a little higher, but they're also 3 times as big.
Yeah, that's true.
So on a square foot basis, we're actually lower value than garden homes. So I'm just wondering how you think we should address that. That's why I suggest amending the guidelines, so then the commission can quite legitimately point to, well, the guidelines are different for garden homes. That was a policy decision made after full public hearing and input. So you, Mr. Smith, in Historic Concordia, are still bound by the Historic Concordia guidelines.
Or in this case, Miss Brown is
Right.
still bound.
Ms. Brown, yes.
Yeah. I happen to own a house in Concordia.
Yes, that's true.
And have gotten certificates of appropriateness.
Yes.
Well, in any case, that's a discussion for another day, but I think it's, personally, I think it's worth looking at given the circumstances of these properties. In any case, in this particular case, the proposal is for the city to sell six houses that we own in the Garden Homes Historic District to Pastors United for $1 a house, and those are located along 25th Street right in here and 26th Street right in here. So they're very concentrated. The 6 properties very concentrated. Pastors United would then renovate the houses and sell them to owner-occupants, and the city would provide a $240,000 challenge grant to offset the difference between the renovation costs, which I mentioned earlier, and the likely resale price. We don't have a lot of information about recent sales, but I can tell you that NIDC did fully renovate one of these properties a couple of years ago and was able to sell it to an owner-occupant for $30,000. So there is going to be a we expect a very significant gap between the eventual sales price and the actual cost of renovation. The terms that we are proposing for this grant are right there. Before the closing on the property sale, of course, we would enter into a development agreement with the developer. They would be required to provide us with detailed scopes of work and renovation budgets, and we do think those renovation budgets may come down a bit in light of the potential flexibility on the historic requirements. We're also requiring that they provide evidence that they have a committed financing to finance all the renovations based on their scopes of work. We would require that the completed properties be marketed to owner-occupants by the developer, and if they were unable to sell to a developer, or owner-occupant, the developer would be required to retain ownership if they're going to convert them to rental, so they remain within the control of Pastors United and they're not sold to another investor. We would require that workers who have resident preference program certification perform at least 1,800 hours of work across the renovation of the 6 properties. That number is pretty much derived from our actual experience with the Milwaukee Employment Renovation Initiative, as the developers working on the Mary project have brought in their completed work seeking reimbursement for their grants. They're averaging slightly over 300 hours of property, so we thought that would be reasonable for this. And also, the grant funds would be provided as a reimbursement following the completion of work. That's why that upfront financing is absolutely critical. I'll close by just reminding you that there are that this activity will support some other initiatives that are going on in the Garden Homes neighborhood, which is larger than the historic district. That, as I mentioned earlier, the neighborhood is located within the Northside Promise Zone. There was a neighborhood plan completed by the Industrial Corridor Corporation earlier this year for the entire neighborhood that has multiple prongs of work to stabilize and improve the area. And there's an organization, nonprofit organization, that we have been working with at DCD called United Gardening Homes that has been doing some property improvements, landscaping, artistic board-up, that kind of thing. So I'm sure Alderman Hamilton can add to that list, but there's a lot of activity going on, and we think that the restoration of these homes and reoccupancy of them would be a very important factor to continue the improvement of the neighborhood.
For Pastors United, for the contractors that you are utilizing, do they have experience in doing historical homes?
Yes. Yeah, we do very good work. And, you know, and to answer a couple of questions, probably shouldn't be talking too much, but, you know,
I'm going to tell you why I asked that.
Yes.
Because, you know, I represent an area that has historical homes in it too. And what I hear from the owners of those homes is it's very hard to get a good contractor because it's not the same as a regular house. So that's why I was really asking, because it's going to take a special kind of contractor to be able to do justice to those homes. So I just want to make sure that you actually were working with people who specialize or have some level of experience with historical homes specifically.
Yeah, we put a very professional team together on them, really. So, and you know, we're doing this, you know, it's not because we want to make a whole lot of money either. We want to make a change in that community.
Right.
And we don't want to lose money either. That's why we thought this grant opportunity was good. And not only that, is we want to do this in promise zones all over the city. And we want opportunities to have homes all over the city. So that would kind of offset some of the costs that are going on right here. So, you know, it's not like we, you know, just said one day we want to wake up and lose money. No. We want to make sure that we establish a goodwill relationship with the city so that we have opportunities to get other homes that maybe don't have such high scopes of work. And that we can do these homes and offset the cost that we're going to incur doing this project. And that's certainly part of what we're looking at, because it is going to be a high cost and low sale point in this neighborhood. Now, we're not crazy. We do absolutely understand what's going on here, but we want to make sure that that opportunity to come in that spot, that area, to do those homes where there's nice, beautiful homeowners, great homes, but then there's these blighted houses all around them. We can bring up the property values by just doing those 6 homes. As a matter of fact, you know, we had meetings with the community, and I told them, I said, well, you better get ready to have your taxes increased because we're going to make these homes beautiful, and we're going to have homeowners come in these homes, and we're going to have families, first-time homeowners, first-time buyers. We're going to have them come in there and take possession of that community. And we're going to be working with the Garden Homes Initiative and, you know, the Promise Zone Initiative. And when we get done here, we want to continue to do homes all over the city. But we want this to be an example of what we can do as a community ourselves.
Of the 23 homes that you've already done or partnered with others to do, what percentage of those ended up in home ownership and what percentage of those ended up as rentals?
You know, we had 2 homes that we didn't get homeowners in, and that kind of caused us a little problem too. But the rest of them, we got homeowners in them. You know, and 16 of them we did just Pastors United, but then we had other churches who wanted to join in after they saw us doing it, so we partnered with them to do homes, and we did the Baptist convention. They wanted to do a home, so we got the house and partnered with them to do a home. So it could be a huge groundswell if we set the example. We can do homes all over the city, Alderman. We could build up promise zones all over this city. And it'll be the community doing it.
Right.
And we can take ownership. We'll have folks coming out of the community who are doing work in these homes, rehabbing them. It's just a win-win.
If I could start my comments off just by speaking a little bit about the past two files. Because what we are looking at here is really kind of related to a broader picture. You know, DCD has been working extremely hard on marketing Century City and the neighborhoods surrounding Century City. But the work that the council has been doing with putting together some initiatives, kind of laying out the policy vision of where we should go. You know, I missed some of the comments before, but hopefully they talked about some of the historical context of how that happened, right? Of doing things differently. And this public-private relationship that kind of came together in order to even put forward two very impactful projects, which is the renovation of Century City as well as getting the Villard Square Library off of the ground. And the ability of having that partnership and the creation of the Century City Redevelopment Corporation in order to be able to make an application for new markets tax credits in order to make these investments, right?
Right.
So, you know, so I see heads shaking that was shared. I want to remind you what that looked like prior to that. What that site looked like when you drove by and saw those huge industrial buildings that looked like something out of a movie. Matter of fact, there were applications from people making movies to do Transformers there, to blow up some things because it looked like
That's right.
a third world country. And the idea that the city making investments into a project like that wasn't something that was widely supported. It took a lot of political will. It took a lot of creativity. It took a lot of doing things differently in order to try to tackle that issue. And then to have the celebration here today about now you have the building, now you have a private investor, now you have... It took some investment from the city, and it took some doing things differently in order to get there. And sometimes people don't like the process, right? People get stuck doing things the way that they've always done them. There's not this willingness to be able to bring new partners to the table, to be able to use our resources in a different way, and to be able to leverage them in a way to benefit the people who live there. That's what happened. That's what happened there. That's what's happening here. What we're trying to do is use the resources that we already have at the table. We're not bringing anything new. We're not asking for new resources. We're trying to bring new partners to the table that can do things a little bit differently, that can partner with the neighborhood and create an impact, and really use the Challenge Fund and some of those resources that were being put in the budget in the way that they were designed. Right? This is really supposed to be a concentrated effort in a specific neighborhood where you're not getting private investment. And what do we need to do in order to incentivize that private investment and encourage home ownership? That's exactly what's happening here. There is something a little bit special and a little bit different here when you have the historic preservation thing that's thrown into the mix, which causes another challenge. So I want to call out, I don't see them here, but I think it's just as good to say thank you to people who are not present in the room. Sometimes those things mean more when they're not in the room. But their willingness to do things differently. There were a lot of challenges. Many of the reasons why what Northwest Side was trying to do and some of the other private investors was trying to do was because of the inflexibility that they encountered many times with going through the historical preservation process. And it just didn't make financial sense to make that type of investment into those properties with trying to meet all of the standards, especially when you didn't see that investment coming back. So that became an ongoing challenge. Some of these houses have been sitting vacant for over 10 years, and they're getting progressively worse. So the longer we leave them out there, then the more difficult it becomes in trying to fix them. And so being able to have partners that are willing to come to the table to take on that challenge is something that's extremely valuable and important. That's worth an investment all by itself. But I want you to also think about the future. and where it is that the policy ideas that's coming from this council is being handled. So now we're seeing investment, we're seeing the creativity, we're seeing things being done differently. So now the question is, how do we make sure that we are not getting gentrification? How are we making sure that the people who are living there are being able to benefit from the investment that's happening in the neighborhood? How is it that we can now make sure that the parts of the city that have had the most disinvestment, that's been most disenfranchised, and really is the most challenging when it comes to redevelopment, how is it that now we can use the investment that is happening in the city to benefit those areas? And hopefully this can be an example of how that can happen in other areas of the city where we're seeing this happen slowly as opposed to as fast and as, you know, enthusiastic as we're seeing it in the downtown areas and some of the areas where you're seeing investment. We can see it happening now. And we can use the tools and the creativity in order to make it happen. And so if we're talking about tackling the gentrification problem, I think it's very symbolic that this is the first municipal cooperative in the nation, right? We took a trip down to Chicago to look at cooperatives and how those can be used to ensure that the stability of neighborhoods and how people are able to benefit from investments in their community and get home ownership. I think it's very important for us to look at this as an example of how to fight that gentrification in those surrounding neighborhoods. So this is not just for my district and a strategy that can be used for us to be able to do that. There's a momentum that's happening around Century City. Alderman Rainey, you've been jumped into a moving airplane and been able to steer that as it was flying.
I'm gonna use that later on today.
But it's true, right? And landed a nice prospect in the process. You know, but it takes the cooperation of everybody at the table in order to achieve those types of things, right? We can't have the type of competing visions in order to achieve large things like this. And so if we can align our visions and align where it is our goals and where we're trying to go, I'm telling you right now, there are some things that we'll be able to accomplish that will surprise the nation. And so that's the direction I think we should go in. I think we're moving at a pace now that people can start to see that it's possible. And you know, I'm proud of the partnership that was willing to come to the table and take on the challenge, and to be a part of a team of folks that can align their visions in a way that can create these opportunities. You know, it's just it's a pleasure to work with. So, you know, so you shouldn't be surprised of the ability that these folks would be able to have. Pastors United got their first house from some negotiations that I was able to work with them with probably 6-7 years ago. Was it 7?
About 3 years.
It was only 3 years? Man. Well, then it was a couple years working in the works for a few years before that.
It was that's right.
But the point being, a lot of the work, Alderman Bauman, you were talking about doing deconstruction a few years ago. And being able to train people to do reconstruction. A lot of the people that were in those pools that were getting trained through that process, I know because they were actually working with Running Rebels, they were working with Northcott, are now in that pool of folks who are actually doing this type of work. So, so being intentional about where we want to go and what we want to accomplish creates an opportunity that we can all be proud of. So I think, and that's where we want to get with these homes. We want to stabilize the neighborhood. We want to stabilize some of the most challenged neighborhoods in the city, and we want to do it with the investment. It's not like we're printing new money. We got to be creative with the strategies that we're using and do it. So that's why I want to I really want to thank the, DCD for coming to the table and saying we can make this work. The Historic Preservation City Clerk's Office was saying that, all right, I know we can do things differently. We can take down the barriers that's keeping us from being successful. It's not necessarily that people are not investing. Sometimes we just need to get out of our own way and let folks who can make it happen, make it happen.
Right.
So I want to thank the committee and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you, President Hamilton.
Move approval.
Alderwoman Cox moves for approval. Are there any objections? Hearing none, so ordered. Congratulations, Pastor Lewis.